So can I get our panelists for building community capacity and Wahi Kupuna stewardship to come up to the stage? And while you do that, I just want to give a little bit of background on this panel theme. So, of course, the first panel of our think tank is building community capacity and Wahi Kupuna stewardship. This topic has come up consistently as a priority within the collective since our first halavai in 2017. In our previous meetings and surveys, it was evident that one of the main goals for us is to have more of a role in caring for our aina and our Wahi Kupuna, because we're the best people for that kuleana. We need to create processes and avenues to increase the opportunities for Kanaka Oiwi to rebuild and revitalize relationships with Wahi Kupuna through direct creation of management, policies, resources, and practices. So a key action item for the collective is to build community capacity sa malama Wahi Kupuna through participation, collaboration, education, training, and resources. So in terms of the survey you guys took as part of the planning for this conference, the survey results show that majority of you felt that the number one priority is to create more resources to inform, educate, and support community efforts. So what we want to discuss today is what specific types of training and education and resources are needed, and how can we get them out to the community. Secondary, another priority was increased collaborations and support from the government and landowners. What specific forms of collaboration and support do we need? Is it access? Is it funding? Is it co-management agreements, stewardship agreements? And how can we better educate and inform them about our needs and our goals? The next priority was increasing training opportunities for communities in Haumana. So again, let's dig down, let's figure out what specific types of trainings and workshops are needed in your guys' communities, in your fields, in your organizations. I think an overarching theme there with is decentralizing the power and control and creating roles for communities to be kia'i at their own places. And so what processes and strategies can be established to do that? And lastly, how can we secure access and management of Wahi Kupuna to reactivize cultural practices in these spaces? So access and management is definitely key. So these are just some of the questions and topics we want to spark through our Ignite talks today, our panel Kuka, and our breakout sessions. And while we won't be able to answer all of these questions or provide solutions to all of the challenges we're facing, this is a start to better understand the complexities of these issues and to identify action items that the collective and others can take on in the near future. So today it's really all about assessing the current landscape, learning more about who's doing great work in building community capacity, and imagining and discussing concrete actions and ways to move forward. So without further ado, I will now introduce our panel experts who will all share a little bit about the core challenge or complexities of the issues relating to community capacity from their experiences, key successes that they have achieved, lessons learned, and some ideas and strategies to move forward. So I'll read off a bio for all of them, and then they'll just get straight into their ignites. So Keoni Fox has worked as a consultant for the wireless telecommunications industry for the last 20 years. A cultural practitioner with maternal roots in the Na'alehu area, Keoni serves on the board of Ho'omalu Ka'u, which manages stewardship of the Kahua Olohu or Makahiki grounds through the county PONC program. An avid hiker and native plant enthusiast, Keoni also serves as a board member of the Alakahakai Trail Association, which has been a strong advocate for the protection of cultural and natural resources in Ka'u. He actively participates in community efforts aimed at preserving the Ka'u coastline and its wahipana. While on Oahu, Keoni resides on a small family farm near his father's ancestral home of Kahana Valley. At Waikane, he manages stewardship of Kukui Ani Ani Heiau, which was adopted by the Ko'olaupoko Hawaiian Civic Club through the city's Adopt a Park program. Aloha, Keoni. Gena Moses-Te Kani is of Ngati Kuia, Rangitane, Mu'o descent. Gena has worked for Hokainuku since it formed in 2010, firstly as the Ka'iwakīloumoku and now as the Po Tātaki. Hokainuku is an alliance of 4 iwi and hapu collaborating on the roading project from Puhoi to Wellsford in Aotearoa. Hokainuku provides cultural and environmental services to the Crown and facilitates social and economic opportunities for their members. Gena leads the management team and is responsible for strategic relationships and the oversight of whole kainuku activities, including growing kaitiaki to actively care for their taonga tuku iho. This is more than a job, it's her ikigai. Gena has 30 years experience in community, hapu, and iwi development in government and management positions, both at a national and regional level. Kia ora, Gena. Alan Carpenter. After receiving his BA in anthropology at UC Berkeley, Alan moved to Hawaii where he joined the staff of the Bishop Museum Archaeology Department. Alan migrated to the Hawaii State Parks in 1991, where he served as a parks archaeologist for 23 years. During that tenure, he completed his master's in public administration and a graduate certificate in historic preservation at UH Manoa. Alan established the Nuololo Kai Archaeological Resource Management Project in Nuololo Kai Napali Coast State Wilderness Park, collaborating with the Napali Coast Ohana, and has worked extensively conducting research and restoration with Hui Maka'ainana o Makena at Ha'ena State Park, Hawaii. He has always been a strong advocate for community-based cultural preservation projects in Hawaii. Presently, he is the Assistant Administrator of Hawaii State Parks, in which capacity he oversees the resource management and curatorship program of the Parks Division. Belina Mai Allen. Brian Warner is a descendant of the Kabi Kabi and Waka Waka tribes on his mother's side and the Barangum on his father's side. Brian has worked alongside various Kabi Kabi leaders over the last 4 years, participating in many cultural heritage negotiations in regards to land use activities to reduce, avoid, or minimize harm to Kabi Kabi cultural heritage. Brian also utilizes his skill as a former recruitment officer to build and harness support from various organizations to assist the Kabi Kabi in developing an Indigenous Ranger program, where his people can draw upon their knowledge and connection to protect and manage land, river, and sea country across the Kabi Kabi estate. Nara Brian. Kekuewa Kikiloi is an assistant professor at Kamakaku Okalani Center for Hawaiian Studies. His focus on teaching and research is in the Hawaiian Studies concentration of Malama'aina, Native Land and Resource Stewardship. He is the co-founder of Noho Papa Hawaii and president of Huliauapaʻa, both a Hawaiian social enterprise and a Hawaiian nonprofit, transforming the way cultural resource management is done in Hawaii. He is born and raised in the district of Ko'olaupoko on Oahu and has been an advocate and leader in the movement for cultural revitalization, community empowerment, and the protection of Wahi Kupuna, or ancestral places. Aloha nui oko. And now we will bring it to our first panelist, Keoni. Kalamai, quick housekeeping. If anybody parked in the gravel lot across the street, you have to move your car right away. And hopefully there's some parking right below you can move your car to.
Aloha kako. It's truly an honor to be standing here among so many amazing leaders in our community and protectors of our heritage, many of whom have inspired my own personal journey. At a young age, I was always fascinated with mo'olelo and Wahi Kupuna. Growing up in a military family, I spent much of my youth on the American continent, longing for a sense of identity. Both of my parents are Native Hawaiian, and ironically, both were raised by their grandparents in rural communities where Hawaiian values were deeply ingrained. In 2001, I received a phone call from my auntie Charmaine Keanu, who lives in Na'alehu, Kavala Ahupua'a. 5 years prior, Ka'u Agribusiness, formerly Sea Brewer, had closed the sugar plantation, and all of its properties, including our ancestral lands below Na'alehu town, were sold to land developers. Many properties were quiet title during the process. Auntie Charmaine wanted me to know that there were survey crews behind her home. I could hear the concern in her voice and the sadness which had become all too familiar. Change was coming to Ka'u, and if I wanted to save our ancestral lands, I needed to come home soon. How do you change the slide? Oh. This was the start of my journey to protect Kavala. Oh, sorry, I'll go back here. Shown on the map here in yellow and blue. Soon the struggle grew to include protection of its neighboring Ahupua'a, Kaunamano with its Pa'ula fishing village to the east, depicted in purple, and Kahilipali with its Waikapuna fishing village to the west, shown here in orange, and the Kahualohu Makahiki grounds in Kaunamano, along the highway right next to the home of my great-grandparents. In ancient times, the inhabitants of these ahupua'a shared familial ties. Together, these lands, steeped in mo'olelo and Wahi Kupuna, consist of a collaborative landscape, almost 5,000 acres and 7.5 miles of coastline. Today, all connected by the intergenerational ancient trail system known as the Alaloa or Alakahakai. Today, the 175-mile-long Alakahakai National Historic Trail is intersected by a series of Maukamakai trails connecting the fertile hillsides of Na'alehu with the abundant marine resources along the coastline. All these lands have been threatened by development interests since the closure of the sugar plantation. For the past 18 years, my family has spearheaded efforts to protect these lands by requesting mitigation from proposed developments and advocating for public purchases and conservation easements whenever possible. For the Keanu Ohana, this commitment has been about honoring our kupuna, safeguarding their resting places, continuing their rich history, perpetuating their values, and preserving their legacy, which is woven through the entire cultural and natural landscape. There are few opportunities where such large-scale preservation of pristine lands is even possible. While our work is focused on these areas, protection of the entire Ka'u coastline has been a long-standing goal of the community. With only a handful of privately owned properties at risk of development, this vision of protecting our cherished coastline can be achieved. Protection of these lands would guarantee a landscape free from development, ensuring continued access. This is important for a community which still relies on subsistence fishing, farming, and gathering. With Kauna Mano and Kavala, the new owners submitted county subdivision applications without completion of any archaeological inventory survey. These future luxury estates threaten the rural nature of the Ka'u community and risk exposure of sensitive cultural sites which had been respected for decades. Our family reached out to the Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation for assistance. With the help of attorney Kimo Frankel, our family filed appeals with the planning department, and SMA exemptions were rescinded. Soon after, the owner withdrew the subdivision application, and the property was back on the market. While the threat of development had subsided, we continued to explore options for long-term preservation with the assistance of the Trust for Public Lands. Together, we partnered with nonprofit Ka'ohana o Honoapo to nominate the property for purchase through the County Public Access, Open Space, and Natural Resources Preservation Program, or PUNC. In the meantime, we have partnered with the lessee, Kuahivi Ranch, to facilitate cultural access. The ranch owners, Michelle and brother Guy Galimba, have also supported access for educational purposes in semi-annual marine debris cleanups organized by local nonprofit Hawaii Wildlife Fund. Raised in Ka'u, the Galimbas have been responsible stewards of the lands, and they are important partners in our conservation work. With Kavala, the preservation effort proved to be much more challenging as the landowner was determined to proceed with the subdivision. I was granted recognition as a descendant by the Hawaii Island Burial Council in 2014. It was my first experience commenting on a burial treatment plan. As the only descendant applicant, the weight of so much kuleana was heavy. I familiarized myself with the Hawaii administrative rules regarding burial sites and reached out to mentors for guidance. However, the property owner had hired both a land use permitting consultant and an archaeologist to represent development interests. Feeling ill-equipped, I decided to hire my own archaeologist to walk me through the process. And finally, a burial treatment plan was approved, which included our requested preservation measures and perpetual cultural access rights. The Ka'u Community Development Plan approved in 2017 included goals and objectives which were critical of these types of developments. And soon after, the Mauka portion of the property was sold to Kuahivi Ranch. These lands could soon be protected through a conservation easement. Recently, the property owner has expressed interest in a sale of the remaining Makai portion for preservation. With the support of Trust for Public Land and Alakahakai Trail Association, we have nominated the property for preservation through the 2019 County PONC program. Both of these organizations have been instrumental in protecting the lands of Kahili and the fishing village of Wahi Kupuna, home of Nali'ipoaimoku, Tutu of Auntie Mary Kavenapukui. Over the last 2 years, the Ka'u community has pulled together and advocated strongly for the protection of Wahi Kupuna. Applications for funding were well received by respective commissions, and acquisition by the Alakahakai Trail Association is now in its final phase. The mission and objectives of the Trail Association are founded on the principles of community-based management with stewardship by descendants and local community groups. Finally, we were also successful in preserving the Kahua Alohu, or Makahiki grounds, through the PONC program. In 2011, the County of Hawaii proposed development of a wastewater treatment facility which would have impacted the adjacent Kahua Alohu, where according to Ntimeri Kavenapukui, the game of Alohu, or Ulumaika, was popular, but was also a place for boxing, javelin throwing, and hula. In closing, I've learned that there are many resources available to secure access to Wahi Kupuna, but it's important to have clear intentions, to remain humble, and to understand your role in Kuleana before seeking access to Wahi Kupuna. Whenever possible, I seek permission of descendants from those specific areas and always respect and acknowledge those who came before me. In my experience, my genealogical connections have helped me to show standing in my advocacy work for Ka'u, but my spiritual connection with my ancestors is what provides me with guidance. In the end, I've learned that I'm only a messenger and a servant of the land who is willing to answer the call. Mahalo.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Kura Hopeful Te Waka, ko Ngāti Kuia Te Iwi Pākuhi, ko Gena Moses-Te Kani. My name is Gena. I'm descendant from Ngāti Kuia Te Iwi Pākuhi, the people who quarried Pākuhi, which was then turned into precious toke, adzes that were traded all throughout Aotearoa. I want to firstly acknowledge all of you as kaitiaki. So kaitiaki for us is your stewardship, our guardianship, and it's our role as servants for our people. And for me, I am privileged to be not only a servant to my own people of Ngāti Kuia, but the people of Ngāti Whātua and Ngāti Manuhiri who have formed this collaboration called Hōkai Nuku. For me, Hōkai Nuku is a dynamic and interesting opportunity to work with an iwi alliance. So we are connected by whakapapa, but actually not naturally working together. So collaboration starts right in the partnership of the entity I work for, and Ara Tūhono is the name of the road that we work on. I never thought I would work on a roading project because roads destroy places, but actually I've had an opportunity to save things. Ara Tūhono is the pathway that connects, and actually our journey has been a pathway. So the first section of the road had one iwi involved. The second section was a response to that, the fact that the first section, the iwi folk were an afterthought. On the second section, we had 4 or 5 iwi and hapu join together and form Hōkai Nuku. And through that process, it's dynamic. It's about growing our community. But what I really wanted to do was just talk to you about the things that have been tricky and the highlights of my project with Hōkai Nuku. So we've been together for 9 years. And the greatest thing for me in this project has been that we have saved this wahi tapu here. So when a road was coming through, because of our partnership and collaboration with the government as treaty partners, so we have a treaty which allows us to push our way into all sorts of things in the place we should be as partners. And the joy of this project was I was there before they put the line on the road. And so being a partner, being inside the tent, not my normal place to be honest, being inside the tent and advocating and making change from the inside meant that when we discovered that there were more wahi tupuna that needed to be protected, we could shift the alignment because we were early enough in the project. Before they had consent to start the project, we managed to shift the alignment, and what I really wanted to talk to you about is all the people that do that. So I'm really lucky I have a team of 12 kaitiaki, so they are our cultural monitors. I have a team of kaumātua and kuia, and I also have really awesome technical advisors in Māori ecology, restoration ecology. Our project is not just about protecting and managing cultural heritage, it's also about a restoration of our whenua. So as the project moves forward, we're hoping that they will give us our land back. That's my all-day, everyday battle, give us our land back. And our kaitiaki will move from protecting and monitoring cultural heritage into restoring our whenua for our people. So the way we do that is we use tuakana teina. I'm not sure if you use that here, which is the elders or the oldest person who knows how to do this job mentors and works with the younger or new person on the project. So we run wānanga. A wānanga is a learning opportunity which is very hands-on. It acknowledges that everyone in the room has skills and contributions and that we will work together to grow ourselves. And then from wānanga we have tuakana teina. This is actually one of our wānanga on ecology, so we were learning about our whenua and epiphytes and all the different lichen on this particular rākau. We went out on Tuesday actually and discovered a cultural indicator for our project, which was a rākau that had 12 different lichen. I'm not sure if anyone's excited about that, but 12 different lichen that will show us if the air quality of our roading project is affecting our whenua. So when we're doing cultural indicators, that's one of our key activities, and the way that we engage our community. It takes our whakapapa, our history and our knowledge of a place. It uses our mātauranga Māori, our Māori science, and it gives us tools to monitor and manage and restore our whenua. And really that's all I wanted to say, because I only had 5 minutes. Kia ora.
We did give them a cushion of 3 minutes, so 5 to 8 minutes, guys. Don't feel so pressured.
Good morning. So I assume you've all been to this site in Wailua, Kauai. No, actually. So my head has been spinning for the last year as I've been deeply engaged in a community-based master plan implementation effort that has been basically foisted upon us by the flood that happened almost exactly 1 year ago, April 15th. Napali Coast State Wilderness Park and Haena State Park have been closed ever since then. And I'm going to start in Mexico, where I just returned from last week, and I'm going to bring it back around to Kauai, I promise. So I believe in, as a park manager and administrator, in venturing out so that we can also then look inward. I like to see what other places are doing. I try to take a trip every year with my family. This year, we were fortunate enough to go to the Yucatan in Mexico, and I was there for the equinox, and on the equinox at this site, which is Chichen Itza, one of the most famous sites in the Mayan world, a phenomenon happens. The designers of this temple 1,000 years ago created it in such a manner that the shadow of a serpent, the embodiment of the god Kukulkan, descends the stairway as it comes down. And so that's what's happening in the background here, right there, into the head of the snake at the base of it. A phenomenal and profound experience. And this is a park that probably has the highest visitation in Mexico. It's a place very similar to places we manage, like Diamond Head. But I did take my family and 5 other families. We dragged them throughout the Yucatan for nearly 1,000 miles and probably as many tacos. And we visited sites on this circuitous route all the way almost to Guatemala. And I'd never been there before. I was just amazingly impressed with the degree of care and restoration and pride shown in these places and how important it is to the folks. Everywhere we went, we met people like this gentleman who is Mayan. We typically would hire a guide because these sites are so vast, it's hard to understand them as an outsider. The guides almost always identified as Toltec or Mayan or Aztec. They were native folks. The sites, like I said, are amazingly restored, and that's accentuated by the fact that these sites were all abandoned between 800 and 1,000 years ago. So when they were discovered, they were just completely enveloped by jungle, right? Which is unfortunately the way many of our sites in the park system that I manage still are today. There is, they are managed well. They charge admission. I always, as a park manager, go around and I take pictures of the bathrooms. We deal with people, parking, and poop. So this photo is not only nicer than any bathroom I've ever seen in any one of our parks, it's nicer than my bathroom at home. Smoked glass dividers. It's a symbol, though. It's a symbol of pride in your resources and in your culture. So at the end of that 1,000-mile journey, I exhausted all of my family and colleagues, and ended up here. This is the city of Mayapan, which is the city that rose after Chichen Itza fell, about 1200 AD. And so this site was completely empty. I mean, I went and I was there alone, right? So this is, because initially at Chichen Itza, it was, are they monetizing this? It's economic vitality. But they show the same amount of pride in a site where one person visits as they do to the one where 3,000 people a day visit. That's something to aspire to. And frankly, I think this is a picture of a place that values its cultural heritage. And I don't think visitors to my parks, unfortunately, see that. And we need to change that. So my parks look more like this, but and you think of that last photo, and then I think of a place that's so important, something like Ke'olona Hihi, Ke'kelani Wahine complex sliced by Ali'i Drive in Kona, under our care, completely covered by jungle. There are people who would love to help us with it. But the political will and the resources that I see the Mexican government putting towards their site, we lack here. At an earlier meeting of this group, I brought out the disparity between the funding, tourist tax dollars that go to HTA to advertise this place, using predominantly natural and cultural resources to get people here. They get $82 million a year. DLNR gets $3 million to manage those 2 million acres of lands that include all these amazing cultural and natural resources. That disparity has to be fixed before we can increase the capacity. I'm getting at the stewardship part here. Before we can increase the capacity of stewardship, because it needs to be community-driven and government-supported, but government has to have the capacity to support it. Back to Ha'ena. So I took this photo 1 week after the floods of last April, and the entire park was destroyed. The parking lot was wiped out, the stream crossing was wiped out, our septic system was wiped out, the water line was blasted out. The one thing that persevered through this massive intrusion of water, 50 inches of rain in one day, was the part built by Hawaiians, the Lo'i system. And I think that's a profound lesson. This site is restored, back to stewardship, because we have this phenomenal relationship that we've built over 20 years with a community group, the Hui Maka'ainana o Makana, who has allowed us to, in the last year, and I'm going to get at, this will get to my final point, which is the shackles of bureaucracy and regulation hang over the ability of communities to do what they want to do, particularly site restoration. And that went away in this last year. And because of an emergency proclamation, we didn't have to deal with Chapter 6C. We didn't have to deal with SMAs. We didn't have to, deal with procurement law. So we are given this opportunity, blessed by this supportive community. I'm looking at Kamealoha Devin back in the back. He's part of this, and I owe him and his community a great debt of gratitude. We are likely going to be able to implement a master plan that would probably take 20 years in 12 months. And it's all aimed at trying to get to that picture that I showed you of Mexico. I want us to look like that place that cares about our cultural resources in the same manner. And there are too many barriers, and I think that we should not be treating our cultural restoration projects with the same lens and the same laws as we treat a hotel development or any other sort of development. We need to loosen that. We need to create better means of access. Because for years, I mean, these groups are so patient with me, and I'm constantly saying, you know, try wait, we gotta wait, we gotta do the compliance, gotta wait for SHP to review it. Well, try wait works great in Ka'upalehu for managing fisheries, but try wait gets the public and cultural practitioners to a degree of frustration that, you know, I hope we can eliminate that and move forward. So I wanted to leave you with that thought that, you know, we've had great successes. They take patience, long trust-building relationships, and too much time. And, you know, we can do better. We can move faster. And, you know, why should an archaeologist be able to dig a trench through a wall more easily than a cultural practitioner can repair that wall? That's wrong. And finally, you know, we all have to deal with the future potential of climate change. So that's another thing. We should be looking at all these coastal sites and consider, you know, if we wait forever, they'll be gone. So why not let people, and particularly Hawaiians, work on adaptive solutions using traditional methods to try to protect these things. Even if it doesn't work, it's worth it. Okay, thank you.
Nara Nulam. Hello, everyone. My name's Brian Warner. I belong to the Dullumbara and Kabara clans within the Kabi Kabi Nation. So my talk today is about Kabi Kabi Rangers, but before I begin, I just want to acknowledge Kelley and the Hawaiian community for allowing me to be here. So, Kabi Kabi Rangers, right? How did we get to this point? About 4 years ago, my elders asked me to come back to our community to assist with building community outcomes. But also opposition lawyers to previous elders. How do I explain it? In previous negotiations, there'd be opposition lawyers that I went to uni with, and you know, because our previous university colleagues, they said, your elders are selling off your culture. You need to get back and save some of your culture. I was like, all right. So I've got these two competing interests to bring me back to my community. So then for the next 2 years after being elected in, I decided to speak to all our young people and to our elders and what did they want. And one of those was a community ranger program. So this is the stage where I'm at now. So then the last 2 years I've been dealing with senior government departments. So we have 3 levels of government. You got your local, your middle and your federal. So this particular ranger program, I'm dealing at the middle level, the state government, but there's also 2 other ranger programs that are being gifted to us at the local level. So we have 7 local governments that we deal with, and 2 of them have agreed to give us a community ranger program. That'd be like your counties that you should deal with. So I'll begin, So on the left is our national parks. So in the green area, they highlight what our national parks are. So then on the right, which is in the top right-hand corner near the Great Barrier Reef, that is my local clan area. That's a Kalula recreation area. So I've approached the state government body about working with them on having access, so to speak. We need to start somewhere, don't we? So access. So why do we want access? It's for cultural purposes, men and women's business, spiritual ceremonies, visits to sites, teaching young people, gathering resources, and fishing and hunting. Before I keep going, I just want to explain a little bit about myself because I'm a bit nervous, so I need to get over those nerves. About 20 years ago, I see here is focused on archaeology, where I started out as having a Bachelor of Justice. My career, I wanted to get into the federal police, but I ended up going to customs, which became our home affairs, a bit like a homeland security. I did that for 6 years, and then a mate said, oh, come on, why don't you come over to the tax office? That'd be your IRS. So I was like, what do I want to do that for? But I did it anyway. So that was a steep learning curve in tax accounting and God knows what, I can't remember half the things that I went through. All I know that next minute I'm working on international money laundering. How fun's that, right? No, it wasn't. Yeah, it was a tough gig, but then I was proven to be really good at intelligence. So they chucked me into intelligence. Next minute I get this graduate certificate in smartness, graduate certificate in intelligence. And next minute I'm working on all this international on international banks, shutting down some banks in Samoa and stuff. Who would have thought this Aboriginal person who grew up, just thought he was going to be an athlete or then work for the police is doing all this sort of stuff. It was a tough gig, and then, but I started to look back at what I was missing, and that was as a young person, because my mother decided to rip me out of our community and put me into a non-Indigenous community to get an education. But I was looking at my identity and what I was missing, I was missing that language, I was missing those hunting and those fishing, and I was missing those areas. That's the reason why I've come back to fight for this. So the nerves are sort of gone now. So participation management. So many Aboriginal people resent having to have a permit to visit national parks, especially where they have historical associations with land. They also complain about the current neglect or maintenance of access to tracks by current park managers. Most of our parks, I think they do a great job, the park managers, but they can't be everywhere. And they don't utilise us. So that was one of my arguments. I said, well, you got all these bushfires. Why are these bushfires happening? Because the country is sick. Allow us to take care of our traditional methods to get back in there. So these were one of the arguments, and they started to listen. So you need a negotiation point too. So I'll keep going. Involve the appropriate people from the area, include involvement in the decision making, provide employment and land management, be supported by funding and resources to establish, organise infrastructure, information, communication strategies and training. This was a hard one. Because we didn't have an organisation, I had to go along and create an organisation. Then I had to go and find appropriate people who had the appropriate training licences. So, and then you look for funding. So then our people are all dispersed. How do we get them on country? So these are all the things that were going through my head. It's about connecting all the dots, or we can say synergies, that's a good word. Maintenance and protections. Land and culture are inseparable. Cultural heritage includes maintenance and use of park resources, as well as looking after special places and particular landscape. Sorry, I'm really trying to go really fast. Okay. It is appropriate and efficient for Aboriginal people to be involved in an ongoing way in parks management decisions rather than being consulted in piecemeal fashion only at the last minute. So we noticed this too. When it came to a lot of cultural heritage or other agreement type outcomes, we're always loaned at the last minute. So we started going, well, I started to say to my people, or to my leadership structure, we're not going in, stuff them. And they go, but we've got to go, like they're going to pay for the meeting. No, let's go on strike. So we'd go on strike for 3 months and you get all these letters and emails and you go, no, we're not coming in. And all of a sudden they go, well, you're not coming in? Because she's coming to us last minute. So now everything, we're up front now with every process. So I think that's a good step. You just got to tell them to go on strike. Establishment of maintenance mechanisms and protocols. Establishment of National Resource Management Organisation ensures the parks are communicating with the right people. We seek to have joint management and arrangement, and to cement the agreement with parks, an MOU has been drafted to seek to have a joint management arrangement. So this took me a lot of time to write. roughly a year. So, and then I worked for various parties. So I went back to the State Department. I said, does this look all right? So really it is, I said to them, why don't you buy this off us for $1? And they go, what? Why do we want to buy that well for $1? Well, if it doesn't work, then we can change a few words to see that it works so that we're working with you. And now it's sitting with the minister, the cabinet minister for that department. So I think for us to get to the stage and where we are, it's been a long haul, but we're getting there. So thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Okay, aloha mai kākou. Super honored to be here today to just share about our Wahi Kupuna internship program for our nonprofit Huliauapaʻa and our company Noho Papa Hawaii. Throughout the presentation, I'm just going to call it the WKIP because that's the acronym that we're all used to kind of saying for this program we created. This program, the WKIP, is reshaping the practice of archaeology and cultural resource management in Hawaii by developing a strong kahua, or foundation, for a new generation of Hawaiian stewards that are ready to take on their ancestral duties to protect Wahi Kupuna and Iwi Kupuna throughout our islands. The WKIP is a program that Kelley and I developed that focuses on giving Native Hawaiians and local kama'aina an opportunity to connect with our homeland, culture, and ancestors by using both indigenous and Western knowledge systems. Ultimately, the aim was to transform cultural resource management by creating a critical mass of homegrown professionals that understand their responsibility to protecting these heritage resources. Coming out of anthropology and archaeology was pretty much an alienating experience for both me and Kelley and every Hawaiian that pretty much we've talked to over the years. Kelley and I both recognize the contentious nature of CRM as archaeology has historically been used as a colonial tool to disenfranchise and alienate our communities. Local news stories are full of examples of burials being dug up or relocated, highways destroying cultural sites, or the blatant disregard of sacred spaces like the issue of TMT on Mauna Kea. With this type of negative public image, it was really no wonder why Native Hawaiians and local kama'aina didn't want to really get into these fields over the years. And in fact, when I look back, at least on my long tenure of school in anthropology at UH Manoa, I mean, we can probably count the Native Hawaiians in maybe one hand. At least now it's changed, of course, but back then, yeah, it was kind of slim pickings to find somebody you could kind of relate to. Yeah. From about 2006, Kelley and I were part of a handful of Native Hawaiians. Most of them are here today, who are in archaeology and related fields that started to meet and discuss ways to decolonize the practice. We felt there had to be a way to gain power back and kind of retake our kuleana as the kia'i, our guardians of our sacred places and heritage resources. But over time, we started to realize that we didn't really have the critical mass needed to initiate change and to build the foundational base that we needed to sort of get things going. And so I remember having meetings with people, having long hours and discussions in our offices, just trying to strategize like what were all the problems that we saw in the framework of how the education system was working, and then what didn't we like about it. And there was a long list. And so we made that list, and we realized that the main thing is that sort of the curriculum that we were being taught was kind of like in conflict like with some of our values, and that there wasn't really a community-based approach to how the work was being done. And oftentimes, academics sort of hold this position of privilege, and I can say that as an academic now, where they feel that, you know, it's sort of their right to sort of just kind of do what they want, yeah? And so those kinds of things really bothered us when we went through school. And so as we started to design the Wahi Kupuna internship program, we started to implement sort of new ideas, yeah. And
In 2010, this program became our first initiative towards change. With the support of Kamehameha Schools, we created a summer field school program that tried to give students a transformational experience, one that would lead them hopefully onto careers into cultural resource management or related fields. We built the program around students learning field methods that we felt were compatible with our communities or that could be adapted and changed to meet sort of our modern needs. These approaches were kind of like the three prongs that I talk about in our program. The first was historical land research. A lot of this stuff we learned in Hawaiian studies, and it is sort of a subfield in its own, how to do research within Hawaiian language-based documents, specifically on land, not general history. The second was archaeological survey, mapping, and other sort of analysis techniques. And this was things that we learned from archaeology that we thought were totally relevant to trying to understand the material culture, which we saw as another kind of record left to us by our ancestors. The third was sort of like tapping into the living community, right? Because we're not dead, we're not gone, we're still here, and our knowledge base is still here. And so ethnography and oral history interviews was the third prong of our approach that we were going to teach the students. And we felt that these three things were the main tools that we learned from anthropology and Hawaiian studies that could create a solid core for our introductory curriculum into sort of this new archaeology. The objectives were carried out. We also realized that this really wasn't enough. The whole program needed to be grounded in Hawaiian values. And this foundation, this had to be the foundation for all of the work that we were doing. And we felt it was necessary to incorporate cultural standards, spirituality, protocols for dealing with cultural sites, and Wahi Kupuna, and appropriate customs and behaviors in these sort of sacred contexts. It was also just as critical to teach students about community engagement and the responsibilities that come with that. These objectives were carried out over a 5-week intensive summer program where the students were immersed in places and communities doing research and field work. We camped together, we worked together, we ate together, we prayed together, and we learned together. And over the years, we refined the program to include other objectives like academic and professional development. This was done through mentorship in research and writing, and providing stipends and tuition waivers for students, aligning the program with our partners in anthropology and Hawaiian studies to obtain college credit, and giving them opportunities to network with professionals and present at academic conferences. The program has generally been focused on Hawaii. As you can see, it's been covering all of the districts, but we've recently moved to Oahu, and this summer we'll be on Kauai. Outcomes. Over the years, we feel we've had tremendous success. We've had about 60 students, and this is kind of data from a few years ago, so actually the numbers are more than this. We've had about 60 students at the time entering the program, and 100 were either Native Hawaiian or local Kama'aina. Of this pool, 20 have been currently pursuing their AAs or BAs, 22 have graduated with their AAs or BAs, and 10 have received MA degrees or are in MA programs, and 1 is in a PhD program. So while this might not seem like a big number, it is when you compare it to only the handful of Hawaiians and local Kama'aina that were getting degrees in CRM only 10 years ago. Through this approach and this new paradigm, we're decolonizing the field and forcing the old regime to acknowledge the important role that people should have in our heritage management issues. We're starting to refine the ways of using the past to revitalize our future, empower communities to reestablish relationships and responsibilities to their places. It is the first initiative that set the foundation for all other initiatives that we've been doing in Huliauapaʻa and Noho Papa, Hawaii. It has always been a goal to create this foundation, and then now we're really moving into sort of the kukulu phase, as you can see here today, as we're trying to organize the collective and do other initiatives within our nonprofit and our for-profit. So with that said, the foundation is firm, and we're moving forward into the kukulu phase. And this is just a picture of one of the first field schools we held at Ahuaʻumi in Hawaii Island. As you can see, the native Kanaka Oiwi that were visiting those places in 1890, taking a historic photo, and we had the students kind of repose in those same positions to show that, we're still here today. Yeah? Mahalo.
Mahalo again to our first panel. You guys were a little bit nervous, but you did awesome. You've instilled and lit up some questions and good thoughts and mana'o in all of our attendees. Check, okay. So right now we're going to actually open it to questions and answers. I'm just going to pose a couple, and then we'll have the opportunity for you folks to pose a couple questions to the panel. Just about 15, 20-minute talk story. Should I just close this? No, the mics are down there. So, I think across the board, the priority themes that came out, that was definitely getting access to our aina, to do what we need to do, to malama our places, to connect with our kupuna and our aina and our Wahi Kupuna, and then of course the community stewardship of those sites, as well as the management, even from the government levels, like state parks. So I was just wondering, if anyone had specific ideas on ways that processes can be, even from coming from the member, going through navigating that process of trying to gain access, or from more of like, a government approach. What ways and processes can be streamlined for communities to be granted access and stewardship of Wahi Kupuna? If any of you guys have any thoughts on that.
Kia ora koutou. So for me, one of the most successful ways that we've been able to gain stewardship of our whenua is our relationship. So even though I've got lots of resource consents that say that they have to work with me and other little relationship agreements, it's an actual relationship face-to-face, that I'm there in their face, I support them, they support me. That the handshake has been the thing that has given us access to our whenua, put us on the whenua, and been able to retain it. So we all know that, a relationship.
I'd like to say collaborative working relationship. That's how the word I would use it. And binding agreements, sort of like, sorry, a handshake sometimes not good enough. If you get a binding agreement, then that's the goal. Yeah. That will allow you full access.
So we at state parks have a whole bunch of agreements. We have 30 plus agreements. Our issue is, anybody, this room, any one of you, has the capacity to fill out a stewardship agreement, and we'd be glad to foster that use. Our problem, again, that I brought up is, capacity, because there has to be the government support of you guys, and I kind of oversee and collaborate mainly with two of these agreements. Just historically, that's been my involvement, both on Kauai and Huliauapaʻa and the Huliauapaʻa. Both have done tremendous work in the parks. I have 52 parks on 5 islands, and I have limited capacity. It's, again, it takes a long time for them to trust us, right, that we're trying to help them do the right thing. You need collaboration and oversight. So for us, it's really a capacity issue. And then secondarily, like I said, the tri-weight constantly coming from us, again, is capacity. But if we could streamline some processes, and I guess one example would be, in the 1990s, it was all about trying to restore fish ponds. And then it became really clear very quickly that the jurisdiction of every agency on Earth overlapped at the shoreline, and it was just impossible, right? We're still trying to restore Hulu fish pond in Kahan Valley, and I started working on that project. That was the first project I ever worked on when I came to state parks. So, but fish ponds have been addressed. There's now there's an overall general streamlined permit process for maintenance and restoration. Maybe we could take that model and use it for land-based applications as well, instead of having to deal with the cumbersome. And SHPD, I throw them under the bus. They're just as overcapacity as we are too. It's not the fault of any individual in that agency, but I think I would advocate for a streamlined process similar to the fish pond general permit. And I think we need to look at amending the rules of SAPD to foster and not look at everything with the same lens. You know, build a hotel should not, you know, that should get the scrutiny. But guys who want to put some walls back together should not.
I think it also depends on context too. I mean, if you're a descendant from the area and you want to steward a cultural site that you have genealogical connections to, I see that as a right that's protected by law, our traditional and customary rights protected by the Hawaii State Constitution. And you can always push that issue. I agree with Gwen. You should always build that relationship first with that landowner, whoever the gatekeeper is, the stakeholder. But that could be a final approach if you have to go that angle. But more importantly, it's really important to connect with the descendants from those areas, those that have the genealogical ties to that Wahi Kupuna. I can't stress that enough. It's just a certain level of respect I think that we all as cultural practitioners need to have, and we need to respect that people do different things in different areas. They have traditions that are specific to that home kua'a, and we should acknowledge that.
Mahalo, and go ahead.
One of the first questions. That in Australia, where we are, in our negotiation, we've negotiated for them to fund some certain outcomes, the state department themselves, to fund some, either it be cultural heritage or in the ranges, so it takes on a different type of work. So we're relying on the government to fund that, state or the government body. So that your body could use that certain arrangement to work that through the internship.
We're trying. We use our efforts.
So I had one more question just about the training aspect
Of training our youth and more for Gena. I would like to learn a little bit more. I think it's something that we've always grappled with, the cultural monitoring idea and framework, and it hasn't really fully worked here for us, I feel. And if you could speak a little bit about some of the successes of your cultural monitoring. It seems like you have a strong hui and network of support. I know a lot of our cultural monitors here, they're one-off, or just individuals just trying to do the job themselves. But how is this Wananga-style training, mentorship, older brother, older sister type of model been working for you folks?
So the first thing is I'm really well resourced, and that helps. So I'm on a roading project, they've got loads of money, they can't move forward without me, so I made sure right at the very, very beginning, they knew it was going to cost them money, that there would be kaitiaki cultural monitors the whole way through. In my relationship agreement, my contract, it's very clear of what the role of my kaitiaki is, both environmentally and cultural heritage. So I had that contractualized before they started work. And in the early stages, I introduced kaitiaki who, my daughter's here with me today. She was one of my very first kaitiaki, so I borrowed them from university in a similar style to your Wahi Kupuna program. That's the program I really, really want. So I used young people right from the beginning with our Koma tour. So we had that tour kanatena in action. I learned as we went, but I knew that we needed to have lots of kaitiaki. Because when you're alone, and I've done this myself, when you're alone, it's easy to be swamped by the power of the structure and the destruction. And so I went to my iwi and hapu community, so 4 of my iwi and hapu are involved in this project, and I said, send me your people. So that it is the tangata whenua, the actual people who have a direct connection to the whenua. Those are the people there, and because I had the resources, could A, engage them, but B, continue to do wānanga all the time. And I know resourcing can be a problem, but the way I've done it is I planned ahead right from the beginning. You can't start this project without me. These are the resources I need, and I made that a key priority. Because without all of our people of the whenua, retaining and connecting and doing this mahi, it's me, the foreigner. So that's another key thing about our project is I am the foreigner in the project, and my goal is to leave the project with the tangata whenua, stomping, reigning, growing whenua. So resourcing, I suspect, is our hardest conversation in this room.
Kekuewa, I know you had an idea that you've thought about for a while about a kia'i monitoring network. Can you share a little bit about that with the group?
So basically, my thinking around this has evolved over the years. Initially, when we started the WKIP, I was like, forget cultural monitors, we're going to build Hawaiian archaeologists that will have the full range of power and ability to make determinations about things. And I still think that's the goal, one of the main goals. But over the years, I've changed my thinking, and I started to realize that, especially from seeing like the models in natural resource management, with especially Kim guys and Felicia guys doing like the nearshore monitoring of marine resources. When I saw natural resources doing that, I was thinking in my head, what is the equivalent for cultural resource management and historic preservation? What do our monitors do? Well, our monitors put on the that safety jacket and the hard hat, and they're over a trench, kind of just looking for anything that might pop up, And so they're a little more like mitigation if you're going to hit a site or burial specifically. But in actuality, like, can we make that role stronger so that's not a cultural monitor, but it's actually a kia'i? A kia'i in the sense of that they have ancestral knowledge, that they have knowledge of the laws, because a lot of times just anybody's getting hired for these kinds of roles, right? And they have some level of maybe basic archaeological experience to be able to do more roles than just stand over a trench. Maybe it's locally based, so the like the Kaitiaki with the Maori, the Kia for Hawaii, they would be locally based within communities, and that they would be like the guardians of the site, like stewards. I was looking into like the kingdom records; they had something like this before. It was for burial caves and certain Wahi couple, basically. And so I think we need to return to those models, and I think what's been holding us back has been sort of this idea of archaeological privilege. Again, always putting archaeology on the top. But a lot of times I'm thinking to myself, like, what can we repatriate as archaeologists back to the community in terms of knowledge? We don't have to be able to do every single thing. Things like basic mapping skills, communities can do that. Assessment reports, basic assessment reports, testing, oh yeah, okay. Basic assessment reports, site integrity reports, things like that. Communities can do that, So can we do workshops that train the communities on these basic levels so that we're not relegating them to glorified vegetation clearers? Because that's basically what we are. When we do malama aina, we go and we cut bush to clear the site, and then it just sits there like a museum piece. We need to be able to activate that, and in order to do that, it requires us to not just have access to the site, but access to the skills and the knowledge that allows us to do meaningful activities in these spaces that matter. Thank you.
Yeah, that'll feed into our panel discussion tomorrow, restoring Wahi Kupuna. I'd like to open it up to the crowd. I think we could take a couple questions from anyone that has for the panelists.
What has to happen for the state to do that? I mean, we had a recent application for new dual care officers, and I heard they had 180 applications within the first 10 hours of listing and had to close it. So there's an obvious desire to be part of this.
Yeah, so we have been advocating. I've only been in this position for 3 years now. I'd like to say that, but to just briefly go back to what Kekuewa said, it's been so refreshing this last year to not have to consult with archaeologists to do all this work. Now that I'm not an archaeologist anymore, it's really, I'm quick to diss them, and I come from within, and we're not doing anything differently than we would have, right? And we're putting in exactly the same things we would have. But instead of consulting with the SHPD archaeologists, I'll consult with the community, right? And we're all getting the same thing in the end. It's just going much faster, and it feels more pono. We have to work with the folks across the street. We don't get jobs unless legislators create them for us. So we've had a moderate success in the last couple of years. We got 10 new positions, which we've been going. I think when I started at State Parks, we had 225 positions. We are, when I took this job, as where I finally am a decision maker, we were down to 125. We have much more land that we have to manage. So we've been taking cuts and cuts and cuts. Don't Care is the same thing. Don't Care. So we have 30,000 acres, which is relatively a small land area. Don't Care has to deal with 2 million and the ocean, right? They have the same number of employees as State Parks does. We're just so far behind not only every other state. You know, we're fighting for rangers and boots on the ground. Same thing. We have 3 ranger positions that were part of these new 10 that we created for and Poly that we've been begging for. It's a start, but I mean, my phone is ringing off the hook for people who want these jobs, right? We just need like 100 more of them. So we need, and maybe it can't come from us. Maybe it seems self-serving. Maybe we need all of you folks and people out, you know, from the communities to say we need this. And it's a slow process. They have a lot of competing interests. There are lots of social issues and other things as education. But we, you know, the lands that we are fortunate enough to manage, they are the backdrop of the visitor industry and tourism, which drives our economy, and we should be able to get the resources to protect them. It's going to take a little longer.
Alan, besides staffing, I thought I heard you mention something about a rule change to change the nature of relationships. Would that be an administrative rule? And could you walk us through that, please?
I'm not an expert in administrative rule process, but yeah, so I was talking about the implementing of HAR, Hawaii Administrative Rules for the Historic Preservation Review process, right? And so they're relatively recent rules, and I know it went through a lot of work. Was it 20 years ago? It's in my mind, it's time for a re-examination of those rules to again account for the desire of communities to manage their own resources and not have to be burdened by the same rules that apply for development contexts.
Mahalo nui to all of you for your manao and sharing and for all the work that you all do. I'm really interested. I'm interested in this mics. I'm interested in this contract in rangers, Kia'i, and then within rangers, the community-based rangers versus park rangers. I think in part some of the work, Brian, you were talking about has inspired some of our own Hawaiian Kanaka rangers, both in the Big Island, on Hawaii Island, but also on Maui with regards to East Maui, and kind of taking up that kuleana to monitor and to engage where the lack of rangers, whether they're at a state park or on the highway, has led to the kind of overrunning of our own Wahi Kupuna. So I guess, Brian, first, what do you see as the kind of importance of the rangers in filling these gaps, some of which Alan might have just pointed out with not enough rangers in parks, but what's the difference between a kind of community-based ranger program versus those that are kind of coming from the government, and to what extent you see there need to be the coordination with that? And then also, do you see a broader indigenous kind of network of rangers? I mean, have you talked to any of the Hawaiian rangers at all? And I'm interested to see if there's potential and if there's also stuff going on with similar discussions with Kia'i and rangers.
A lot to think about. How do I address it? So we've got the Kabi rangers. So they're your community rangers. So when we're talking to the State Department, we're looking for also to address the recruitment or the needs there. We also addressing that we want at least 3% you know, just say they recruit 10 rangers, we'd want 3% of our people to be also recruited along the process. Or we also want to take on a volunteer program with the State Department, so they spend 2 days a week to be trained up as a ranger, but that's on the state government side. And for our side, we talk to the government about, okay, you aren't doing the re-veg or, you know, any type of ranger work they can't get around to doing. We fulfil that need, but we also fulfil our need through our own funding to do cultural heritage. In order to keep it building our capacity, we speak to other nations around us, and some of them have built their own ranger program, but we're more focused on the north of our country because the nation to the north have actually built theirs as a community-based rangers, where the one to the south, it's sort of like more family related, and in order to get participation, you need to make, or from the collective, you need to make it more community, because then every family or every descendant of the group or of each clan, they start to see, oh, they're doing something, we want to be part of that. So it starts to become an engine, and it comes, you know, gets bigger. Does that pretty much address what you're after? But if you do manage to get a community ranger program, there's no need to say, look, we just do that here. Why can't we have collaboration? Why can't we visit Australia, you know? Then I could talk to the state minister who looks after environmental section, saying, look, hey, these guys are doing some good work. You should reward them, bring them over to Australia, meet the guys up north, then come down and meet our people down the south. You know, who knows where this can go.
We also have an Indigenous Ranger program in Aotearoa through our Conservation, Department of Conservation. So it is for young Māori, and one of the exciting things about it is they often spin off into the sciences as well. So the Ranger program could be for our folk that want to be out in the field, but then they grow into learning something awesome about our kakapo or our other science programs. So yeah, we've got a program too.
I guess I'd like to just pose one remaining question. Can you guys think of any specific actions, at least that this collective or our hui can move forward with to address and to build some of our capacity in our communities? Or is that something for the breakouts? Anyone have any?
So some of the things that we've been talking about in Aotearoa is having a network of kaitiaki. So actually having a formal network, so I'm not sure if you have that yet. Also having some quite clear opportunities to gather, to have one nationally. So for us, we're quite spread out, and I feel that that's the same situation you have as well. If an entity like yours hosted wānanga and developed that whakawhanaungatanga, the connections that we're all making today to stay connected, then when you become isolated on your own, at least you have a team somewhere else that can support you.
One of the things that we've been talking about with Alakakai Trail Association is to encourage communities and descendants to monitor and steward sections of the trail. We already have that happening in certain areas, South Kona and up in Kohala, but we're looking to expand that. And in a sense, those individuals would almost be like kia'i, monitoring damage to the trail. A lot of times we have unpermitted developments that are bulldozing those areas, but also stewarding the associated cultural and natural resources.
For us, you know, culture is our business, right? So in order to try and get them to be cultural heritage monitors, we're thinking of developing a Certificate 3 in government, a training program, so that allows them to have the RPO when they do go on to uni. So if they go on to do archaeology, or hopefully we can put in some town planning components too, so that might help with cultural monitoring also.
I think anything that has to do with decentralization of power is a good thing, you know? I mean, right now, to me, like our communities are sort of dependent and reliant on the government and sort of the central network to try to like solve their problems, and we have to think about ways in which we're going to solve those problems ourselves, you know. And I think one of the challenges is that a lot of communities don't know how to maybe organize, they don't know how to create their own groups, they don't know how to get funding and survive in sort of this kind of competitive funding cycles and sort of environment, you know. They don't know where to get the knowledge from and who the partners are can link up, and they don't know how to get access, you know. And so there's all these different barriers that are holding back communities that might have interest in becoming stewards. But you know, I think we can learn a lot from natural resource management, and we have a lot of you folks here today because I see an emergence of sites in natural resource management that are happening much faster than cultural resource management and historic preservation. So maybe we can start to look at some of those models.
I just thought I'd mention one more avenue that DLNR has at its disposal, and that is the Ahamoku Advisory Council, which is something established, and there are actually, you know, there's a couple of, only one single paid position, but it gives us a direct connection to lineal and cultural descendants in the communities that we may not otherwise have access to, and it's been very helpful for consultation.
Okay, well, I'd just like to give one more round of applause to our first panelist and for sharing some really valuable mana'o. And so now it's just all about getting together with your breakouts, and we have some pre-designed questions. And yeah, just have a good kuka, and we'll do that for about 45 minutes.